Welcome to today's explainer. So, when you hear the words beauty pageant, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Probably glittering gowns, perfect smiles, maybe a bit of superficial entertainment, right? Well, scratch that. Because in the Philippines, pageantry is so much more than that. It's this massive, multi-layered sociological spectacle. Today, we're going to unpack the complex geopolitical history behind this whole phenomenon. We'll trace how it evolved from a literal tool of colonial control into a global platform for national pride and cultural soft power. It's fascinating stuff, so let's get into it.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the crowning of Bio Windorski, then we'll move through four historical stages: the colonial spectacle, the modern Filipina, post-independence nationalism, and today's global pageant powerhouse. Finally, we'll wrap up by looking at national pride versus economic barriers.
All right, let's jump right into part one, the crowning of Bia Windorski. Okay, let's dive right into this. Bia Millen Windorski is absolutely not just a beautiful face walking down a runway. I mean, get a load of this resume. She's a graduate of the University of Wisconsin-Madison with degrees in history and international relations. She actually focuses her research on U.S.-ASEAN relations. She served as a Philippine Embassy Fellow, and she even interned at the East-West Center over in Washington. So, when she steps onto that stage at the 75th Miss Universe in Puerto Rico, she is bringing this intense, battle-tested geopolitical background with her. It really shows how the modern Philippine pageant system is specifically selecting for this incredible level of global communication skill and fierce intellect. But to really understand how we got to candidates like Bea, we have to look back. We need to trace the shifting evolution of beauty standards through time. Our academic sources actually identify four distinct historical eras of Philippine pageantry. We've got the Spanish colonial era starting way back in 1565, the American colonial period picking up in 1898, the post-independence and Marcos era from 1946, and finally, the contemporary global era from 1986 all the way to today. Which brings us to part two, stage one, the colonial spectacle.
Now, what's really interesting about this early period is that during Spanish colonial rule, these pageant-like practices started popping up as fiesta queens or carnival queens during big religious celebrations. But, and this is a big but, this was not a celebration of local beauty. The ideals were explicitly entirely based on European aesthetics, Spanish lineage, and Catholic piety. So the reality? Indigenous Filipinas were systematically barred from participating. No way around it. These early pageants were incredibly restricted by class and race. They were basically visually performing the colonial racial hierarchy, keeping Native women as mere spectators while elevating anyone with Spanish features.
Moving on to part three, stage two, the modern Filipina.
Okay, so everything shifted in 1898 when the American colonial administration arrived. They established the Manila Carnival, which introduced these very Miss America-style competitions. And to really grasp this era, we have to talk about a crucial sociological concept called mimicry. Mimicry is basically when colonized subjects adopt the colonizer's cultural practices and standards, but, and here's the kicker, they insert their own local identity into it. It produces a performance that's almost the same, but not quite. So Filipino contestants were actively navigating between these new American values and their own unique cultural identity, creating this really fascinating hybrid performance up on stage. It was a dramatic pivot. We moved sharply away from the Spanish-era values of religious piety and Spanish heritage and pivoted directly toward American ideals. Suddenly, the quote-unquote modern Filipina was expected to be highly educated, super familiar with American culture, and above all else, fluent in English. Pageants literally became linked to the American civilizing mission, promoting ideas of democracy and progress, all through the image of the pageant queen. Next up is part four, stage three, post-independence nationalism. So, post-1946, things changed again. During this time, particularly under the Marcos regime, pageantry transformed into an explicit state-sponsored tool for nation building. As our research points out, pageant victories became seen as hard evidence of Filipino excellence and massive sources of national pride. This is when the Binibining Filipinas organization was founded, and when early queens like Gloria Diaz won in 1969 and Margie Moran in 1973, their international victories were framed as these huge national triumphs. The state essentially used these queens as cultural ambassadors to project soft power and sophistication to the rest of the world. And this brilliantly illustrates a massive turning point in the culture, the transition from Western approximation to nationalist beauty. Rather than just trying to, mimic European or American looks, pageant discourse finally began to celebrate authentic, indigenous aesthetics. The beauty of morena, or brown skin, was openly championed. Filipinas were celebrated for looking authentically Filipino, which was honestly a major step forward in cultural confidence.
That leads us to Part 5, Stage 4, Global Pageant Powerhouse.
So, how exactly did the Philippines become this completely dominant force internationally in the contemporary era? Well, our sources break it down into 5 key pillars. First up is procedural. We're talking about the rise of these brutal, basically Olympic-level training camps that drill candidates on their runway walks, known as pasarela, and run them through intense mock interviews. Second is societal, these massive, highly organized fandoms that treat pageantry like it's a national sport. Then you add in a historical alignment with global standards, the legacy of former queens constantly mentoring the new generation, and finally, a massive industrial infrastructure. It's an entire business ecosystem of sponsors, designers, and coaches, making this a highly professionalized, rational career path.
Which brings us to a very special number 4. That's the number of Miss Universe crowns the Philippines has secured so far, with Catriona Gray famously capturing it most recently in 2018 with her iconic lava walk. And what's amazing is that modern queens like Catriona and 2024's Chelsea Manalo, they don't just win and go home. They use this massive global platform for deep social advocacy, championing really important causes like children's education and youth empowerment.
Finally, Part 6, National Pride versus Economic Barriers.
To truly understand this phenomenon today, we have to look at the contradictions. We've traced how pageants evolved, right? But has gatekeeping truly disappeared? Well, no. So the crucial point here is that in the Spanish colonial era, gatekeeping was explicitly based on lineage and race, completely excluding indigenous women. Today, sure, the rhetoric is all about democratization, but modern gatekeeping, it's almost purely economic. The practical reality is that aspiring queens face these exorbitant, entirely private costs. I'm talking about paying out of pocket for specialized training camps, professional wardrobes, styling, and pageant fees. This heavy financial burden essentially reproduces exclusivity through the market, strictly limiting who actually gets the chance to compete. We're going to wrap up our explainer today with this lingering, pretty provocative post-colonial question. Does winning on Western terms truly subvert global hegemony, or merely master it? Filipinas are absolutely dominating on the world stage. There is no question about that. But they're often doing so by perfecting Western-style interviews, English fluency, and globalized beauty standards. So as B. Wendorsky heads to Puerto Rico to compete for that 5th crown, it's really worth asking if the system has been broken or if the Philippines has just become the absolute best in the world at playing the game. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive today. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.